The topic of religion is trending, and not just because of the newly elected Pope. A religious renaissance has been brewing across the nation for a while, particularly among Gen Z men. These young men are finding their faith and outpacing their female counterparts, becoming more likely to attend weekly services than women their age.
I think people are just really hungry for real peace, for real meaning and purpose. But really for peace, and especially in this world of technology and busyness and stress and anxiety. The stress that we all live with, especially as young people today, is overwhelming. And there's only one thing that can offer like this real rest, this real peace. And it's not just scrolling, it's not just another Netflix show to binge. It's spending time in silence with God. And he tells you these things that you just needed to hear, and he just fills you up with love.
All right, so these young men are flocking to Christianity, in many cases navigating religion with modern technology. Their smartphones opening them up to the world of worship. Ed Stetzer is a pastor and dean of Talbot School of Theology at Biola University and joins me live. Ed, thank you so much for your time today. In your opinion, is this resurgence really happening?
Well, there's no question. We have more than one data source now that points to the reality that we see a renewed spiritual interest among Gen Z. Also, and in particular, Gen Z young men, for the first time in the history of tracking religion research that we have in American history, more young men, Gen Z young men, more young men than young women are going to church. And that's good news, but it's also the bad news is that an increasing number of young women have dropped out of church. But yes, there's renewed spiritual interest. The New York Times noticed it on Easter Sunday. I wrote the article in USA Today about it on Easter Sunday. We're definitely seeing a renewed interest in spiritual matters.
You know, and we know that so many people are glued to their phones. So many people are glued to social media, and it can result in a lot of negative feelings. It can result in feelings of loneliness. We know the past administration basically declared an epidemic of loneliness in America. What do you think is behind this return, or this finding religion, if you will? And do you think this trend continues?
Well, I think what's behind it is that the current state of affairs in our world has proven that there's not a lot of hope to be placed on the inevitability of progress that was sort of promised in the modern experiment. I think instead, there's a crisis of young men in our country, for example, and not all of them are turning to faith. Some of them are turning to Andrew Tate and other places where they're finding unhealthy models at best and toxic at worst. And so, but some are acknowledging that maybe the world in which we live right now, the doom scrolling, the challenges of mental health all around them, they're just not finding their hope in the promises of the world, even the promises of technology. So many are turning to the good news of the gospel. As Christians, we would say Jesus' death on the cross for our sin and in our place, and they're trusting and following Christ, and that gives them a foundation different than the foundation they've been experiencing in the world today. It's not just in the U.S. too. I'm actually headed out next week to the U.K. I teach at Oxford University twice a year, and there's significant shifts in the UK data, particularly among young men. The American Bible Society just put out a study. Again, young men engaging the Bible more. So I think as a person of faith, as a Christian, I'm hopeful that this leads to answer your second question, this leads to more than just a bump, more than just a temporary shift in the numbers, but actually leads to people hearing and responding to the good news that's found in Christ.
You know, and Ed, so we're seeing this with younger men, Gen Z men. But think about, older generations, people, who in theory are closer to the end of their lives, which is when many people tend to come back to religion. Why do you think we're not seeing this happen with older generations? And for whatever reason, we're seeing it in these young men?
I think it's one of the questions that we're still trying to figure out. I think in part, people sort of have come to peace maybe by the end of their life, the older stages of their lives, with here's what I believe or here's what I don't believe. Just historically, we know that young people are sort of trying to figure things out. And the young people today, Gen Zers, and we just had a graduation at Biola University, and we saw all these amazing graduates walk across the stage. But I got to tell you, they're stepping into a world that's different than when I graduated, 30 years ago. So I think the uncertainty in the world causes people to look to a more certain future and a more certain faith. And I think for many people that's found in trusting and following Christ. But I do think that one of the questions we have to ask is, why is this specifically of interest to young adults, more so than before. I'm actually literally, I'm on the road. I'm speaking at an event today, and we call it the Lead the Way Tour, and I'm literally talking about the data that we're talking about on this program right now. Matter of fact, I'm gonna tell them I was on your program. And but one of the questions we'll talk about as we break into some smaller groups is how do we engage older adults? And remember, I said earlier too, young women are dropping out of church, and that's a cause for deep concern as well. How do we engage young women as well?
Yeah, still lots to learn here. All right, Pastor Ed Stetzer, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.